But the sequencing here really matters. Here's the story. So the night of June 25th into the 26th, operators from Ukraine's main intelligence directorate flew a drone directly into a MiG-29 at Belbek Air Base near Sevastopol. One aircraft destroyed, the ground support servicing it destroyed as well, and then they released that footage on July 4th. They just released that footage yesterday, and all of these different strikes across the peninsula puts combined damage figures at over tens of millions of dollars. Then on July 1st, Ukraine's security service hit Saki Air Base. Saki? Anybody else want sushi at this point? 5 successful strikes on aircraft shelters, hangars, confirmed to contain Su-30 and Su-30SM fighters. And then Russia simultaneously is releasing images of the Su-30 actually taking off and flying combat missions. They're saying that it's flying close air support missions for attack helicopters, which to me sounds like a very bad idea right now, because the attack helicopters are going to be very close to the hostilities in the front lines of this war. And those are going to be targeted by drones, by man-pads, by small arms, and you put a fighter jet right up there above it. It's kind of like ringing the dinner bell for a Patriot missile operator or an advanced surface-to-air missile system operator. Not necessarily a good idea, in my opinion, but hey, Russia's been known to go with force over strategy or go with size over strategy. I mean, look at their hats that their military wears. Their hats get a little bit wild. It's like, do you guys really need a hat that big? And they're like, don't ask questions, just wear the big hat. Okay, wow. Just calm down, Vlad. But think about that. 7 hangars, 7 fighter jets destroyed or damaged across both of these sites. Then overnight, July 4th into the 5th, NASA, their thermal imaging lights up and shows more strikes and also fires at Kerch Ferry Terminal, and a drone corridor opens up over an airfield in Crimea as well. All these running in parallel. 12 electrical substations across occupied Crimea disabled in 48 hours. So striking their power as much as possible. And then also, they're striking power that feeds Russian military infrastructure across the peninsula strategically. 6 airfields hit in 6 days. This is not a strike campaign. This is basically a demolition schedule, and Russia's being handed the receipt. But now let's get into the platforms and the doctrine behind them, because here's what makes these strikes impressive, but not just these, strikes that are going even further into Russian territory. Because right now, at these different bases, especially in Belbek, the 38th Fighter Aviation Regiment lives there from Russia. MiG-31 interceptors are there. Russia tried to hide these. They moved them there in 2023. They wanted to keep this hidden because they didn't want it to become even more of a target. This isn't a soft target either, because they've rebuilt the different aircraft shelters for those MiG-31s. Even though those were rebuilt and hardened, this didn't keep these strikes from happening. None of that hardening mattered. So at this point, Ukraine's telling Russia, yeah, you tried to harden your targets, but your hardening wasn't enough, because to us, they're still soft targets. Sorry to tell you that, bud. You're still a little bit soft. You might want to try a little blue pill for that. Ukraine's like, it's actually a little blue and yellow pill that you'll really need. But now let's talk about the primary weapon that I'm seeing, and it's just being released as well. It's a 2-meter-long AI-assisted kamikaze strike drone called the Hornet, reportedly developed by a US-based company that has backing from former Google CEO Eric Schmidt. Nice job, Eric. Way to get into defense, man. That's what we need. We need smart people getting into defense. That's awesome. The Hornet uses onboard algorithms to autonomously recognize military targets, cargo trucks, fuel tankers, aircraft on a tarmac. It doesn't need a pilot to fly to the target. It's said that it does need a pilot to approve the strike in-game, and that's a very important distinction. So not having to have a pilot behind the wheel all the way there is awesome. And also attaching this thing to a balloon is huge. You don't necessarily need it for the distances in Crimea. You could, though, to use it to save battery, but think about it. You fill a helium balloon, you hang the Hornet from it by the tail, you check the wind forecast, and you let it go. The balloon drifts upward. In testing, it's said to have reached 8,000 meters, somewhere above 22,000 feet, carries the drone deep into Russian-controlled airspace. The drone stays on just long enough to track its GPS position and maintain a pilot connection. When the release mechanism triggers, programmed by altitude, coordinates, or a timer, the drone detaches and glides down towards the target zone, propeller off. Like, talk about efficiency, battery basically untouched. So by the time it fully engages and begins its attack run, it's said to have used approximately 5% of its battery. 5%. The entire transit, it's using just 5%, which means it has effectively doubled or tripled its strike range for the cost of a helium balloon and a tank of helium. And maybe a clown there to tie a few balloon animals so that Russia sees it coming in and gets distracted. Oh, is that a balloon dog? At this point, I think the biggest middle finger that Ukraine could do to Russia is actually tie little balloon animals onto these bigger balloons as they're coming in. So the radar operators are like, oh, wait, what is that? Is that a balloon dog? But with this increase in range, Ukraine is really showing that there's no longer a safe space for the enemy, and specifically striking deep into Crimea itself. And we're going to get into the full context of exactly what's going on with this campaign. And I'm seeing something that no one else is talking about. But before we get into that, let's talk about the adversary picture here, because Russia's obviously very capable. So here's what I'm seeing, though. They basically have S-300s, S-400s, Pantsir systems that have been disabled but not fully eliminated. And some people have said, why don't they bring in S-500s? Well, S-500s would be their most advanced surface-to-air missiles, and right now their S-300s and S-400s are being absolutely decimated, so that's just not a good tactical move. They're like, oh, our other systems are being destroyed, let's bring in our biggest piece of technology. So I wouldn't expect to see that there at all, but they're trying to reinforce their anti-drone infrastructure in Crimea right now. That's their goal, but they're being simultaneously targeted on a massive scale, and they're not really able to provide any protection, as we're seeing with these fighter jets being hit. Basically, some of their biggest assets being hit with drones coming in above the treetops, and Russia's anti-drone rockets, the missiles that they're using to try to shoot down drones, just are not that advanced, and they don't have a lot of high-powered microwave technology. They haven't really focused on the technology end. They've gone more towards trying to advance their rockets' optical seekers to try to strike down drones. But if you look, at that recent attack with Ukraine blowing the lid off of that oil tank, it wasn't even from a drone. It was from a Russian interceptor missile itself. That's how big these things are. It just shows how big and powerful those missiles are, and how they haven't really solved the problem of actually targeting drones with enough accuracy to really matter. And now that means they're losing their Su-27s, their Su-30s that are in hardened shelters, and this MiG-29 that we just saw hit a couple days ago. Here's what's left in Crimea, though. Satellite imagery now shows damage to 6 of the 7 Crimean airfields. The SBU, so Ukraine Special Operators or Special Forces, have been striking this since 2025. They destroyed a fully armored Su-27 on a taxiway during an active combat sortie in 2025, which is just wild. This recent strike, this one was getting ready to go out. They also targeted 2 Nibu SVU early warning radars and S-400 linked fire control radars, which are very expensive. Total damage in that single night alone was estimated at $300 million. So the cost asymmetry here is the real story. A $50,000 Hornet drone can fly into Russian territory and strike down a multi-million-dollar jet. And in Crimea, it might not even need the balloon to get there. So right now, Russia's radar operators are scanning for jets at altitude. They can't see anything because Ukraine's coming in over the treetops, and these Russian operators are just hearing about it on Telegram. They're like, oh man, that's too bad. I wonder what that loud noise was above me, huh? Looks like more places are getting struck in Russia. Oh, why can't I open up the lid to this thing? You made it to the Global Roundup, my friends. So unfortunately, on July 1st at 3:30 in the morning local time, an MH-60S Seahawk helicopter from the Helicopter C Combat Squadrons that are operating right now in the Persian Gulf did an emergency landing, an emergency water landing. There were 4 crew on board, 3 recovered in stable condition, and now the search continues for that one missing sailor. So thoughts and prayers that we find them. It would be a miracle to find them, but miracles are possible. And remember, there's a massive armada of rescue forces there doing everything they can to try to find this military member. That means using drone boats, using other helicopters, using unmanned aerial systems to try to scan the water. At the end of the day, no man left behind, and that's exactly what our military is showing right now. Keep going. Pararescue is likely out there right now doing everything they can to try to find this missing member. And that brings us to the 40 chess strategic analysis section, my friends. So here's the single strategic insight that everything else in today's story is building towards. Crimea isn't just a peninsula for Russia. Crimea is the command nodes that make the Black Sea theater work. That's how important it is. It's where the air defense radar networks anchor the southern flank. It's where the naval aviation staging platforms cover the whole fleet. It's where logistics corridors that feed Russian forces in Kherson and Zaporizhia, where it terminates. When you degrade Crimea's airfields, you don't just remove aircraft from the order of battle, you blind the radar picture, you expose the fleet, and you sever the logistics chain feeding 2 active fronts simultaneously. So Ukraine's sequencing here, it isn't random, and I can see it playing out. Radars went down first, and then the SBU's December strikes took out the Nibu early warning systems and the S-400 fire control radars at Belbek that degraded the detection architecture. Power went down second, 12 substations in 48 hours, systematically targeting the electrical grid, feeding military operations across the whole Crimean Peninsula. Aircraft going down third, because once you've blinded the radars, you've cut the power, the jets are on the ground and they're the most expensive target left in the theater. And now they can't go up anymore. You've just disabled the ability for these combat jets to do close air support for the helicopters, if in fact that's what they're doing on the front lines here. So what we're looking at is a massive suppression of enemy air defenses, not run with F-16 Wild Weasels and HARMs like what the US was able to do in Iran, but this one is run with propeller drones, balloons, and AI targeting algorithms, which is huge. Now let's layer in a bit of the diplomatic picture here. So on July 4th, it's said that Trump spoke with Putin for 90 minutes and Moscow called it businesslike and constructive, and then separately spoke with Zelensky, who described a real prospect to end this war. Both calls timed against the NATO summit in Ankara starting on Tuesday. So while those calls were happening, though, this is what's kind of wild, Russia launched 500 plus drones and 11 missiles at Kyiv. So the optics of a massive strike running simultaneously with that peace call, they're not accidental. It's basically right out of Iran's playbook, or Iran's using Russia's playbook. Russia is negotiating with one hand and escalating with the other. But I could see on that phone call, Trump's having that diplomatic conversation with Putin. They're trying to get to something for a peace deal. Trump's like, yeah, I think we could get this peace deal done. And then Vladimir seems distracted. And Trump's like, hey, you seem distracted, Vlad. Is your finger on the big red button for drones right now? And Vlad's like, oh. He's like, no, of course not. Of course, I would never have my finger on the big red button launching drones. Launch the drones. Can you guys launch the drones? Trump's like, I heard that, Vlad. And Vlad's like, oh no, I said, bring me some vodka. Bring me some vodka for Mother Russia. So there you go. Ukraine is running a systematic attrition campaign against Russian air power in Crimea. 6 of 7 airfields hit in 6 days using AI drones, helium balloons, and a cost curve that is mathematically unsustainable for Moscow to absorb. The math is what might move these actual negotiations. Russia's jets in Crimea are burning, and that can't really be disputed. So what do you guys think? What do you think happens from here? Let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear your thoughts. Go ahead and follow me on X, follow me on Instagram. I'm posting there pretty much every day, and then watch this next video that pops up right here. It says Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off. I could see like a TripAdvisor review of someone who's going to Belbek Air Base in Crimea. They're like, well, the experience turned out really weird, but it started great, and we have a few notes. Check-in was very smooth. The tarmac was very well maintained, and out the front window was a MiG-29. It looked outstanding, very shiny. 5 stars up to that point. Unfortunately, while we're standing there, it looked like some sort of a drone appeared. Looked to be like a yellow and blue flag on it. Might have been Ukrainian. We couldn't really tell. It appeared to have an AI symbol on it as well, just completely running off of AI. And we must say, it was very weird when the drone actually blew up the MiG-29. But we think that management actually wanted a fireworks celebration because it was July 4th in the United States. So we're pretty sure that, yeah, the Russians are just very patriotic and they want to support the US. Even though it was a multi-million-dollar fighter jet, we're pretty sure that they're okay with that just for the celebration and the fireworks. Wow. Actually, we're going to switch this back to 5 stars.